However, let's get to our big hitter. It's Fundi Sithebe, who's the Chief Operating Officer of the Airports Company South Africa, or AXA, as many people would know it. So we're talking aviation and we're talking to a person who's in leadership in that position, which is very topical considering we are talking Women's Day as well. So Fundi is in the Cape Town studio. Fundi Sithebe, good chatting to you, and thanks for joining us and being our big hitter for the evening.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Ashraf. I must say that I'm personally very moved by what you just said now, around your commitment to using your platform in every single manner to make sure that us as women are being advanced, that our cause is being heard. And for me, that really, really means a lot to me. It makes it all that much more special to be here with you tonight. So thank you very much.
I'm glad you think so. But it's more, something we need to repeat and repeat and copy and paste all the time. Which brings me to, we're going to talk about lots of things, even in the field of aviation, but certainly you as a business leader and someone who just happens to be a woman now, we will be amiss not to pick up on what I've said and you've said. Let's then talk about, we'll talk about the state of women in society in a moment. Let's just talk about the most topical thing, which is, what is Women's Day done to shift the needle?
So, I think maybe let me answer it from a couple of perspectives, and then I'll speak to the Gender Summit, the Aviation Summit that we've been on for today. So for me, we've now really started bringing to the fore what the thousands of women brought to the fore back in 1956, right? There was a march, and a very significant one at that. Mm-hmm. And for me, every single year, it reminds us that the struggle is not over. Every single year, although it must be a daily struggle, right? It must be a daily conscious activity that we do. But on this particular day, it reminds us that we need to really galvanize both women and males to ensure that from a women and a gender parity perspective, we never lose sight of that. And so today, bringing it to today, I literally, it's been a very long day. There hasn't been a holiday for us. We've been really, a number of women in aviation have been brought together in Cape Town to really start to distill some of the issues that we face within the broader aviation sector. We know that the numbers are shocking, Ashraf, in terms of women in leadership, whether it be pilots, technicians, etc., or people within the airport space, that there is really, really a huge call for us to have some deliberate action, deliberate implementation to make sure that women are brought into the aviation sector, and something that's very personal and dear to me, being an aviator for so many years.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thought. We'll talk about other things. So does Women's Day and Women's Month, does it assist in shifting the needle? For example, you mentioned the Gender Summit, so maybe one may say, yes, it does, because it galvanizes all of us in this month, or on this day, around this day, certainly, right? But can we say it's impactful?
Most definitely. I think, so we might not necessarily start to see a whole hive of activity, right? But I always think that the best place to start is really to create the awareness. And as soon as you start creating awareness to say that, folks, hang on, there's a problem, you start then opening up conversations, and you really start to bring a different perspective, different voices that are being heard in one day, in one voice, in one venue, for us as a collective to start to understand that, one, we're not alone in this fight, because I think all along we think that we're fighting this fight, or we're progressing as independent women. But what this does is that it galvanizes us. It makes us see really the power around collective union in bringing issues like this to the forefront. And once we come together to air our different perspectives, our different views, I think it brings us that much closer to potential solutions, to really putting our minds and thoughts together around an action plan that will put us together in a deliberate plan of implementation.
Okay, let's then talk about and the state, in your opinion, of women in society. And you've noticed I haven't said women in business, just women in society. What's your pronouncement on that?
Do we have 2-3 hours?
Well, you actually don't, but maybe that's like the real world. We don't have time to fix problems, and that's the issue.
and you've hit the nail on the head. And I said it, I alluded to it earlier on. So we've got this challenge, and maybe let me speak about my personal story. It's, you become the COO of an amazing company, of an, airports company, being, airports operator, best airports operator in Africa. But in the same breath, there's technical expertise, there's company imperatives that I need to do. And yet at the same time, I'm a normal woman that needs to bring to the fore other women, do my mentorship, so I always say that unfortunately or fortunately for me particularly, it feels like where I am, I've got to run the race 10 times harder than my male, compatriots. But it's a fight that I've signed up for. It's a fight that I'm willing to take on. But at the same time, I also say it's important that now that I'm here, there's still a lot more to do for the women that are coming behind me. There's a legacy that I've got to create. There's a highway that I'm going to open up so that other women don't necessarily have to go through the fights and the efforts and the pressures that I've had to go through, and it becomes somewhat easier. So I can't be here and be content and say, hey, I've made it. That's not good enough.
But therefore, do you find when a woman is appointed to a executive position, senior executive directorship position at big organizations, that it is a given that not only must that person perform and meet certain bottom line targets as per any other executive in the world, okay, but at the same time, it's almost like running a political party movement for women's rights within your organization. So you actually have two mandates. Does that, well, first of all, is it true, and does it come across that way?
Definitely. In fact, I'll even add on a third mandate, Ashraf. So you're doing this job at an executive level. You are making sure that you are also opening up and taking care of other women. But thirdly, you are also every day fighting stereotypes, fighting biases, where you've got airline CEOs, for example, global airline CEOs saying that a woman can't do my job. So it's a threefold fight every single day that you've got to take in, and notwithstanding the fact that you're also a mother, a wife, etc., etc. So it is a heavy load. It is a very heavy load. But like I say, it's a responsibility I've taken on, and it's a commitment that I said I've taken on myself, and I have to. And there's many more women, as we could see today. We were all there in our numbers, 500, 600 women at the Cape Town Convention Center for a common cause, and that for me is just superb.
And how then do you cope with these dual functions, the business leader function, but the activist at the same time?
Oh, you got to take it one bite at this elephant at a time, right, Ashraf? So I guess, and the most important thing is I'm also a certain perfectionist. You can't drop a ball, right? So sometimes there's very, very long nights. I was counting as I was about to come to your show. I've got two gray hairs now, and I'm only 39, right? And I suspect there's a lot more that I haven't seen. But it really is about always remembering what the end goal is, right? So for me, the end goal is ensuring that our operations from an airports company, South Africa, are world-class, efficient, etc. Obviously, we've got our transformation at the imperative of what we do as an organization. And what I find amazing is that also resonates with me personally. So when we speak transformation in the broader part of airports company South Africa, we're speaking about gender parity, we're speaking about transforming the communities which our airports operate in, and thirdly, we speak about transforming the look and feel of the people that we do business with within the airports. So it really ties in very nicely with my personal rationale, my personal motivation around just changing this world and changing this environment to be a better place. So it does become a little bit easier. The workload is a lot, but it does become a little bit easier when you've got that alignment in terms of objectives. And I'm pushing and pulling in the right way because everything is really aligned quite nicely for me. So I am very fortunate. There are long nights, but I think it really helps because everything is so in alignment and it makes it easier.
Okay,
Not easy, but easier.
Easier. Fundi Sithebe is my guest. She is the Chief Operating Officer, the COO, that is, of the Airports Company South Africa, AXA. We're talking aviation. We're talking aviation in this country, global aviation, the business around that industry. But we certainly are talking women, justice for women, transformation around women, women getting their place at the front table of all things that absolutely matter in our country. All of those things on the backhand year of Women's Day. 0891104207. That's the call-in number. You can tweet me, hashtag SAFM Viewpoint when you do tweet, and then tag SAFM Radio, and you can tag me as well, Ashraf Garda. And as always, you can SMS to 40938, 40938. And yes, in particular, women, you need to call. Not that it's solely restricted to you. Women, males, females, all absolutely welcome. Young and old. And if you're a first-time caller or a regular, well, we certainly want to get your thoughts as well. The show is called The Viewpoint, and I'll emphasize that. It is not just the viewpoint of Fundi Sithebe, but it's certainly your viewpoint as well. Okay, Fundi, let's just talk about that issue of the issue of transformation with regard to women empowerment in the country. Give me your opinion on that. You know, where are we at? What more needs to be done?
So I think that we are starting to move the needle, Ashraf. So let's acknowledge that. But I think that there's a lot more for us to do. I really think that there is, I said earlier on, there is power in putting our resources together and going for a common purpose. So what we've done as Airports Company South Africa, we've deliberately put transformation as one of our strategic pillars towards what we call Vision 2025. And it really seeks to really start to address some of the imbalances, the economic imbalances, obviously the gender imbalances, you know, in terms of the workforce, but the economic imbalances around what we see within the aviation perspective. So Ashraf, I'm sure you've flown quite a bit. You've observed that the airports are a very dynamic business hub, prime real estate,
Absolutely.
Lots of things happening there. And what better place, what better environment to really start changing and challenging that status quo. So we, as Airports Company South Africa, have really deliberately gone out on a transformation drive, and we say that not only do we want to bring in new players into the business, we want to, with an impact, a real economic impact, but focusing on black, female, youth, people with disabilities, that particular area, to ensure that people that have always been in aviation are comfortable, and sometimes they don't necessarily see the imperative for change. And we're saying consciously it is time for change. Consciously it is time to start bringing in people that have never been in the airport space. Let us all be equally open and accessible to having these opportunities. And we've had a deliberate transformation drive to start bringing women. So we've got a couple of great stories within OR Tambo, for example, OR Tambo International Airport, where we've got a female concessionaire who's got 2 or 3 opportunities, shops within the airport space, and doing phenomenally well. You know, so it's also about, and here's the other balance. One, you open up the play field, you level it up to bring in more entrants, to bring in new players, to introduce new players in a different dynamic. But more importantly, you must ensure that there is sustainability, that not only do they succeed within the airport space, but that they become enterprises that can equally survive outside of the airport. And so we've been deliberate over the last couple of years to put together a robust program around our ESD program to bring in, you know, different players and make sure that we really, really support them from an enterprise perspective. So we are doing our part in terms of introducing women, black youth into the airport space. But, you know, it's a journey, it's a start. And naturally, when you start shaking things up, Ashraf, people don't like it. People get shook, for lack of a better word, and you start seeing people litigating against you because they want to hold on to what they think is rightfully theirs and what they believe they've been, you know, really expecting for a number of years. And we say, no, it's time to really open up the playing fields here.
So therefore, you know, is it fair or unfair to follow the line where, if, for example, you're promoting women within AXA, and you're promoting, well, not just women, but also with a bias towards black women to redress certain imbalances, is it fair to say, or accurate to say rather, that it must come at a price? That means if you're going to promote someone, in this case women or black women, it does mean that others will be denied. It isn't that the nub of the you know, give to someone but take away from somebody else.
Definitely. I agree with you, but that's in, I guess, where we come if we had an equal society right? If me and you, for example, had the same opportunities historically, and then all of a sudden I, out of nowhere, get promoted ahead of you, there's a certain element of inequality there. But in this perspective, and I keep on using the words deliberate implementation, a deliberate act, to say in the history of airports companies South Africa, or in the history of any organization where you've typically never had black females really playing their part within an executive, that there is then a deliberate implementation of making sure that not only do you put in the people that meet that criteria, but technically capable and technically sound people as well, in terms of, that promotion. But I wouldn't say that it's unfair. And the irony is right now that, my group colleagues that report into me, it's five males, but the most supportive, the most amazing group of colleagues I could, have as a support structure. So I don't think they feel, and maybe I'm putting words into their mouth, but I don't think they feel that there was an element of inequality or them being done hard by me getting the position.
Okay, and yet some may say others feel the same, and what do we do about just that? My guest is Fundi Sithebe, the Chief Operating Officer of AXA, the Airports Company of South Africa. She's our big hitter for the night. Jay from Durban, welcome to the show. Hello.
Hi, hello, Ashraf, and good evening to Sithebe. Yes, I just picked out on that point when she mentioned about only black women. But don't you think it will be fair if you take them on accreditation? Are they, no matter what, you're just going to only take black women. So when you say black woman, which means you're not including the Indian, colored, or white. So in this stage and age of our South African democracy, now you're excluding the other races.
Okay, but you don't know that, Jay. Let's find out. Okay, hold on. Just clarify, Fundi Sithebe, what do you mean?
So maybe remember in terms of, Ashraf, in terms of when we speak triple BE and BE generally, that in South Africa, black is considered to be African, Indian, colored, and I think even Chinese. So it's a broader perspective of us saying black. And I deliberately use black because that is the commonly used terminology. So apologies, Jay, there was not meant to be an exclusion of any other race.
All right, Jay, thanks for that call. But I think it's commonly known, unless that law changes, and there's been some people who suggest it should change, but that's not our discussion today. It's commonly known when we talk broad-based black economic empowerment and affirmative action. It includes those categories of people, including women, who actually fall under those that would benefit from affirmative action, are seen as those candidates, all BE as well, right? Let's then pick up on the issues around just aviation in general, right? Maybe just AXA in terms of what does the airports company do? Why I'm saying that there's the airports company, there are the airlines like SAA, which we're well aware of. There's also the Civil Aviation Authority, and I get rather confused in terms of who fits in where.
Okay, it is a very large landscape, Ashraf, and like I say, I've been in aviation for a number of years. What I didn't mention earlier is I also used to fly light aircraft, so that's where my passion for aviation really started. I used to hold, I still do, but it's just not active at the moment, a private pilot's license. So what you've got in the aviation space is you've got the regulator, that's the regulatory body that makes sure that we are all licensed accordingly, that the skies are basically safe, and they set the rules and the rules of play and how safety is implemented. You have obviously got the airlines, whether they be domestic airlines, whether they be international or what we call regional airlines. You have got the airports, who obviously provide the infrastructure to make sure that passengers get into a plane, get off a plane, etc. And then you've got what's called ATNS, Air Traffic Navigation Services. I always make a joke to say, when we're up in the sky flying, you don't get somebody saying, okay, I'm going to turn right now, I'm going to turn left. But you've got somebody actively directing you, giving you a compass direction. And that's what ATNS does. So you've got the four major players within that space, and then obviously then you've got the different sub players that like in our perspective that will play within the airport space.
And therefore, typically in terms of the work that you do, what is it that you do in a typical week?
Well, I do everything and anything. So my responsibility, Ashraf, is to ensure that as airports companies, South Africa, we've got a network of 9 airports across the country. Obviously, the 3 big ones being OR Tambo International Airport, Cape Town International Airport, and King Shaka. And then we've got 6 around the regions to make sure that from an operational perspective that we are integrated, we really provide an efficient service to our passengers, being normal passengers and obviously stakeholders, airlines, regulators, etc. So really my role is to ensure integration, ensure that we've got a superior value proposition that we offer to our passengers, and to make sure that we are aligned, that you kind of get a similar experience in whichever airport you go across. I know sometimes that doesn't happen, but we're doing our best. We also have shareholding in 2 other airports outside of South Africa, in India, in Mumbai, as well as Guarulhos. So to also make sure that from a concession perspective, that our investment is well taken care of, and that we are providing the best operational support to ensure that we get a good return on our investment.
And it's interesting the point you made earlier on, which is, I've traveled and seen what airports look like, and let me just give this observation. Besides the obvious thing of traveling from place A to B, I think that in a strange way, being able to travel, going on a plane, whatever flight you take, being at the airport, buying from those stores that you talk about, and seeing people walking to and fro, particularly in the morning when you're on a business flight, in particular, right? There's a sense of energy which is incredibly affirming. I spoke about being on the front at the table of change. Just being at the airport, for a fact you are in that privileged position of people who are economically active, and I find it gives me that thrill every time. Do you get the same sense?
Oh, you're so right, Ashraf. I usually like to take about an hour before I have to start my boarding process, etc., just to really step back and look at things from a passenger perspective, because sometimes what also happens is that you're so caught up in the operations, and sometimes you really think that what you're putting together for passengers is right from an operations perspective, and you lose focus of what it is the passenger actually wants. So as I came out to Cape Town 2 days ago, I just took a step back, spoke with the security, you look at the lifts, look at what's not working, and you really then just take a step back and you say, okay, what needs to be done to make this place? But it's a hive of activity. It's the most amazing place, Ashraf. When you see people embracing when they just come back home, and you see people rushing. Okay, sometimes you see the grumpy person as well. You just see happy. You see all sorts of people. It's like a shopping center. It's the best place to just observe people, emotions, activities, and I love it. It's the heartbeat of the economy, and you see it. It's palpable. You can feel it. You can smell it. It's an exciting place to be.
It certainly is. And then, in terms of how do you measure yourself? You mentioned, having relationships with airports in India, etc. As AXA itself, besides obvious profitability, how do you measure that you're doing a good job as an organization?
So the one thing that we pride ourselves is that we are a world-class facility. So we have to provide world-class facilities because we're a global player, Ashraf. And you say that, you traveled a bit, and I know you've also traveled internationally. And the big thing for us is we have to stay on top of international best practice benchmarks to be with the best players. So what we do is we subscribe to a couple of things. So there's what's called the Airports Council International, ACI, which is the airports body of the world, right? It's about 250 airports that come together as one voice. And incidentally, the CEO of Airports Company South Africa, Bongani Maseko, is the chairperson of the body, the world body. So we are part of that. And what that helps us to do is we really start to have tangible conversations with our peers to see what it is that we can do, airport sizes, airports similar to our size, etc. We've also signed a very successful sister airport agreement with Munich Airport to really start to leverage on some of the things that they do. They are what's called a 5-star airport in Europe. And it's to say, what are some of those elements that we can take back to South Africa to implement, etc. We are there's something called Skytrax, which is also a world organization where they measure using certain criteria the airport efficiency, and they give you a ranking. So we are very proud that the 3 big international airports are within the top 35 airports of the world. And sometimes we never really truly grasp what it means. You know, as South Africans, we kind of say, oh, this is not working, that's not working. But you've got to elevate yourself. You're saying, if you're playing within the top 35 airports of the world, we must be doing a hang of a lot.
So
right.
is it very difficult to get into that top 35? Because I'm thinking someone will say, well, top 35 is like the top 50. Come on, there's like 40 airports ahead of you.
Look, and you can always say that, to say, I mean, why? And somebody was shouting at me two weeks ago to say you've got to aim better. And I'm saying, no, you don't. Yes, you must aim better. But in a global space of airports where you've got over 500 airports, right? And you have got 3 within one country that sit within the top 35. That is amazing. That is amazing. And I'm not saying that everything is perfect, Ashraf, because people will tend to say, you know, you'll be resting on your laurels, you become complacent, and you'll kind of brush yourself and you say, well done. We say no. But the fact is, we must celebrate that milestone. We must be proud of it. This is a South Africa Inc. that is really pushing the boundaries, and really we're claiming our stake in the global stage. So we can't take that for granted. This is an organization, I mean, we're celebrating our 25 years since we've been formed. And for us to have achieved this at this stage is really quite amazing. Yes, there's things that we need to do better. Yes, there's things we need to improve on to really make sure that we start moving the boundaries from top 35 to top 20 to the top 10 to the top.
Absolutely.
You know? So yeah, there's still work for us to do.
Well, I'll repeat what I often say is I'm part of this project called Champion South Africa, and that is to move this country to become a champion nation. But to do that, we need to be the champions in all sectors of society. Just one or two things is clearly not enough. So it's in the country's interest that you as EXA gets into the top 1 in the world, and let's hope that happens, right? Let's then talk about just some of the findings in terms of the Global Aviation Summit. I understand it continues tomorrow as well, right? I mean, just some of the things that have been discussed that you'd like to just share with us.
Wow. Ashraf, it's been amazing. So the first thing that I was taken aback of, I didn't realize there were so many women in aviation, because like I say, all too often, I guess we get caught up in our daily fights and our daily struggles and in our daily jobs, etc., that you forget to lift up your head and to see that I'm actually not alone. So that's the first big thing for me, that it has really just put us together and it's both women and males, right? That are participating. But I think the biggest thing, and what's also passionate for me that we've been speaking about, is for us to really start to redress a lot of these gender imbalances. It's not necessarily at my age or at an older career age, right? It has to start with the girl child. And that speaks to, what do you start to teach the girl child in terms of their place in society? What do you start to instill in terms of values, in terms of that courageous behavior that we start to plant at a very, very early age, before society starts to build in all its biases, all its criteria on girls and boys equally, that we have to start at a far, far earlier age. And what that does, that starts to really unlock just the perspective that these kids, our children, start to see and start to really grasp. And when aviation then comes, it's not some phenomena that's really, so far removed, so foreign to them, that they're willing to embrace it and they know that they can actually be successful. I use the story that that many women and I put it out to them, that many women that are in aviation now, we did not even know about being in aviation as a prospective career until much, much later. We either got in by accident, we were poached or etc. And the reality is, because aviation is still not really a subject, aviation is not really captured and, in terms of content, packaged nicely for high school or even, earlier phases, that it's like an anomaly. And what you find is, if you've got kids that are not really sure of who they are in society, or kids who've been told that you can only be A, B, C, D, when they start being introduced to aviation, they're still not grasping it. They're still not brave or confident enough to go into it. And as a result, if we don't address that from the grassroots, from the early days, we're going to find it very hard to actually retain and or attract women into aviation. So the journey doesn't start now. The conversations start now. The conversations are being had by women in aviation right now. But our impact starts far, far, far earlier. So the conversation around where do we start? What do we need to do? What are some of the things that we need to highlight is what's being really being discussed and debated heavily. So tomorrow, one of the things that we want to do is put together some sort of a roadmap of, because you also don't want to talk shop, Ashraf, just to say, hey, we're unhappy, You actually need to start having tangible implementation steps. And so tomorrow we put together a roadmap from the 2 days discussions and actively then start to put project plans of what we're going to achieve going out from tomorrow.
And, it's interesting you use the word talk shop. So is it right to talk about the changing the narrative that it needs to actually happen, not just at senior level, but it needs to go back to absolute grassroots, which in this case would actually mean at school. And that's where it all starts first.